Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Nick. Welcome back to our Let's Read of the Sympathizer. Today, we're on chapter 13. Super quick one here. So we're going to do it a little bit differently than the way that we have been doing things so far. Because kind of so little really happens in this chapter, we're just going to kind of take a look at the two scenes that take place, and we'll just kind of dive a little bit deep into both of them, but we'll still get a little bit of a bare bones summary. And then our play-by-play, like I said, is just going to be a bit of a deep reading of both segments. But first, we'll start with a super brief summary, and then we'll get into our regularly scheduled programming of our play-by-play summary. So the Sympathizer and Sunny argue in Sophia's living room. The general runs the volunteers through some exercises, and the Sympathizer behaves like a petulant child for an entire chapter. That's my summary for this chapter. Like I said, there really is not a lot that happens in this chapter. You know, we're in Sophia's living room for the first half, and then the second half we are in the desert with the general and the men who are set to reclaim Vietnam. And that's pretty much it, honestly. We get a lot of the Sympathizer kind of acting out, more or less. There's a few segments in this chapter that I would really like to kind of read word for word, but those we'll get into when we kind of get there. But yeah, here we go with our play-by-play, which is going to kind of act as more or less our deep dive for the episode as well. Just because, like I said, not really too much happens. So I know I've said it so many times up to this point, and I probably shouldn't really say it anymore. So the chapter starts with us back in Sophia's apartment, where her and Sunny were kind of sharing a romantic evening at home. Wine glasses and a photo album sit on the table, the remnants of their planned night together standing at attention. The Sympathizer offers the cigarettes and vodka to Sunny and Sophia, who happily oblige him. The three sit smoking and drinking, and eventually the conversation devolves into an argument between Sunny and the Sympathizer. Sunny asks politely about the Sympathizer's experience in the Philippines, and he recounts the broad strokes of the filming, but he leaves out the near-death experience at the end of production. He says at this part that he is, feeling defeated, so he doesn't have the heart to tell these people that he almost just died, which I think is really funny. He falls deeply into his feelings and begins to lash out at Sunny in particular, while trying to embarrass him in front of Sophia, because of the fact that Sunny is here with Sophia. He, for whatever reason, not really for whatever reason, I mean, the reason is pretty obvious, but yeah, he starts lashing out, instigating an argument with Sunny to try and make him look bad in front of Sophia, which is disappointing to see from the Sympathizer, honestly. The Sympathizer asks about the people in the photo album, and Sophia says that they're her family. Sunny then starts to pick out the people in the family by name. The Sympathizer doesn't really remember anything about any of them, or really having ever asked about Sophia's family, but he is kind of fascinated by Sunny being able to kind of crack the Sophia free love shell and actually getting to know about her life and history. I think that the Sympathizer and Sophia shared a pretty surface level relationship when they were together, and so for the Sympathizer to kind of come back and see Sunny more or less be in a committed monogamous relationship with Sophia is like just as strange to him as anyone being in the house, and I think that he's hurt that it just so happens to be Sunny who he's mortal enemies with for all intents and purposes. So the conversation then shifts to Sophia's uncle Abe, who was a conscientious objector who was imprisoned for refusing to fight in World War II. He has since returned to live in Japan with his people, and Sunny mentions that he would like to travel to Japan to meet Uncle Abe. And it kind of highlights the depths of the relationship that Sunny and Sophia have, because she says, yeah, I'd really like for you to meet Uncle Abe too. And I think that's the Sympathizer never really had this kind of connection with Sophia, and it's kind of adding to the hurt that he's feeling, which then causes him to lash out. He brings up Sunny's speeches during their college years, supporting the revolutionary actors and kind of commending the power of the people to determine their own future. He utilizes his lessons from Claude to kind of hit Sunny with a low blow, asking whether he stays in America because of his feelings for Sophia or because he doesn't truly believe in the revolution he so staunchly supported. At this point, Sunny kind of folds. He is defended by Sophia, but really the only defense that's mounted in his case is from Sophia. She says that his people are here and that there's work to be done with them here in America. She poses the question back to the Sympathizer too, though. She says, isn't your home now here as well? But Sunny insists that Sophia not defend him. He admits that the Sympathizer is right, which is the first time in history that the Sympathizer thinks that this has happened. The Sympathizer is naturally surprised to hear him concede. Sunny then admits his failures and commends the Sympathizer for fighting the fight that he believed in, even though he doesn't support his politics. He says that he despises them. He respects the Sympathizer for his actions, and this kind of fascinates the Sympathizer. He's really not used to Sunny admitting defeat like this. I think part of the play here by Sunny is, obviously the Sympathizer is walking in on something that he wasn't expecting to find. He's just getting back from a long trip without really any mention of the progress of the trip during the duration. So he's kind of coming back to what he expects to find in Sophia, and it's just not close to the reality of the situation. Again, Sophia kind of comforts Sunny, saying that they're the same type of person and that he has no reason to feel ashamed for being in America still. The Sympathizer is kind of reeling from this conversation, and he is once again brought back to their college days, where even in winning the argument, the Sympathizer has kind of lost the room. The Sympathizer states that it's never too late to fight, to which Sunny and Sophia both agree, but in such a way that signifies the closure of the romantic interlude between Sophia and the Sympathizer. Next, we travel to a remote area near an Indian reservation where the general and 10 score, or 200, of his best are training to reclaim their country. Prior to this, the general outlined the organization of his fighting force to the Sympathizer on cocktail napkins at the pho restaurant, which the Sympathizer pocketed and passed on to his aunt in Paris, along with photos of the men training in the California desert. The general's men, once again dressed in camouflage and standing at attention, finally resemble their old selves. These men kind of had something taken from them when they entered the country, and with the general's help, they have been able to reclaim that something. They've been forced to work low-paying jobs in demeaning conditions, but once again, these men stand proudly and attentively when addressed by the general. Even though these men look silly with their vintage rifles and their mock patrols, the Sympathizer warns Mon in his communique that this is how revolutions start. Enough people getting together who are willing to die for the right reasons. The Sympathizer codes this warning, as well as the identities of the men scheduled to undertake the recon mission through Thailand. It's going to be Bon, a man he calls the affectless lieutenant, and a man he calls the grizzled captain. The Sympathizer asks the men about their wives and children in an attempt to understand their commitment to what is kind of shaping up to be a suicide mission. We know about Bon's family, obviously. His wife and child were killed during the flight from Saigon. The grizzled captain says that they got separated at Da Nang and that the Viet Cong charged them with the clearing of swampland for his relation to them. and the affectless lieutenant just says that they're dead. Doesn't really expound upon the topic very much. He just says they're dead. Both men really kind of seem unperturbed by the idea of the suicide mission, and the sympathizer kind of mentions as much in his letter. This is a segment that I wanted to read word for word because I think that it's really kind of indicative of the way that the sympathizer feels about the danger that these men pose. He says, "Dear Aunt," I wrote in invisible ink, "these men are not to be underestimated. Napoleon said men will die for bits of ribbon pinned to their chest, but the general understands that even more men will die for a man who remembered their names as he does theirs. When he inspects them, he walks among them, eats with them, calls them by their names, and asks about wives, children, girlfriends, hometowns. All anyone ever wants is to be recognized and remembered. Neither is possible without the other. The desire drives these busboys, waiters, janitors, gardeners, mechanics, night guards, and welfare beneficiaries to save enough money to buy themselves uniforms, boots, and guns, and to want to be men again. They want their country back, dear Aunt, but they also yearn for recognition and remembrance from that country that no longer exists, from wives and children, from future descendants, from the men they used to be. If they fail, call them fools, but if they do not fail, they are heroes and visionaries, whether alive or dead. Perhaps I shall return with them to our country, regardless of what the general has to say." So I think that the sympathizer has a certain respect for these guys, enough of a respect for them to take them seriously. You know, a lot of these people are down on their luck, maybe, but they also have that something that these kinds of revolutions are built on. You know, they have the desire to make the world different and the willingness to die for that desire. You know, these people are kind of willing to pay the ultimate price in order to change something, and that in and of itself, I think, is deserving of being taken seriously by the communist handlers and the Communist Party, really, in the sympathizer's opinion. We then get a little bit of the sympathizer trying to dissuade Bond from joining the recon mission, but it really proves to be impossible for him. Bond lauds the men who stayed behind, including Mon, which is interesting because he doesn't know that Mon is actually a communist spy. He compliments them on their bravery and their willingness to go down with the ship. Without his family, he has been reduced to something less than a man, and this mission is a clear path towards regaining some semblance of that honor and dignity that he had while in the Republican Army. So this is another segment that I just wanted to read word for word because I think it shows the way that these men feel from a first-person perspective, you know, rather than the sympathizer kind of theorizing about why they're doing what they're doing. This segment really shows straight from the horse's mouth, you know. He laughed again, this time without humor. "I'm hard on myself. Don't call me a man or a soldier either. Call the guys who stayed behind men and soldiers. The men in my company, Mon, all dead or in prison, but at least they know that they're men. They're so dangerous, it takes other men with guns to keep them locked up. Here, no one's frightened of us. The only people we scare are our wives and kids, and ourselves. I know these guys. I sell them liquor. I hear their stories. They come home from work, yell at their wives and kids, beat them once in a while just to show that they're men. Only they're not. A man protects his wife and children. A man isn't afraid to die for them, his country, his buddies. He doesn't live to see them all die before him, but that's what I've done." So I think that it kind of gets to the root of the issue that a lot of these guys are experiencing, you know, this disenfranchisement that they're kind of dealing with. And the only path forward, the only conceivable path forward for them is kind of joining up with this counter-revolution in order to feel some sort of hope, you know. I think that a lot of them are working these dead-end jobs under what's it called? They're underemployed, you know, and I think that the suicide mission, and of course, you know, the grizzled captain, the affectless lieutenant, and Bone are really the only people who have committed to the mission, to the recon mission through Thailand at this point. But, you know, these guys are all out in the desert for a reason. And I think that Bond kind of pinpoints that exact reason. You know, they respect the people who stayed behind, and in order to kind of reclaim some of that lost dignity, they choose to go back and try again, So after this kind of segment with the Sympathizer and Bowen having that conversation, we're back in Sophia's apartment. Sonny asks the Sympathizer about the training exercises that the general is running. The Sympathizer kind of denies the allegations and states that if they were true, though, that there's no way that he would tell a communist. And Sonny deflects, stating that he's not a communist, which surprises the Sympathizer a little bit. The group talks about the war being over, and in rising to leave, the Sympathizer attempts to impress Sophia one last time and state that wars never end, they just go to sleep. Sophia offers her cheek for the Sympathizer to kiss, Sonny extends his hand, and the Sympathizer kind of retreats with his tail between his legs here. Back at his apartment, where Bowen is already asleep on the bunk bed above him, he's kind of crawling back home after an unfortunate situation that he was really not prepared for in the slightest. A frightening nightmare of an ear-covered tree shakes the Sympathizer awake, and the chapter ends with the Sympathizer kicking off his sheets and looking under his pillow before returning to sleep. So I think that one of the most important takeaways from this chapter is the ending of the relationship between Sophia and the Sympathizer. Through their actions and through things said and left unsaid, it's pretty clear that Sophia and Sonny have developed a really intense relationship during the Sympathizer's absence. The Sympathizer will now kind of have the ability to focus his romantic attentions elsewhere. I think that he's committed, for whatever reason, to the idea of being with Sophia. He doesn't really talk about other women or his interactions with other women during the Hamlet sequence, so outside of him trying to sleep with Asia Sue, he's kind of only got eyes for Sophia. He comes back and he's excited to see her. But this situation, I think, really marks the end of that relationship for the both of them. But like I said, it kind of opens up the door for someone else to slide in, and I think that I hear Lana's music playing somewhere nearby. I think this also might kind of fracture the relationship between Bowen and the Sympathizer. The Sympathizer wants Bowen to stay safe in the States, but Bowen says that his life is not worth living because there's nothing really for him that's worth dying for. I think that it's going to be interesting to kind of see the development of their relationship in the future and to see how the recon mission goes, because it might have some unfortunate consequences for Bowen. I think that this chapter is also a pretty interesting departure from the last few chapters. There really isn't much that goes on. We get to see the Sympathizer in Sophia's apartment, and then we get to see the training exercise. But outside of that, we really don't get a lot of action. We get a lot more of the Sympathizer acting like a child, though. We get to see that side of the Sympathizer, which we don't really get to see very often. It's funny that following his near-death experience, the Sympathizer kind of seemed like he was turning a corner in his life, He visits the widow, he confers with the general, even in the quiet moments when he's alone, it seems like he's kind of emotionally maturing a little bit, but not really. This chapter, he slides back into emotional immaturity, thrashing around Sophia's apartment, like I said at the beginning, behaving like a petulant child. He's angry, he's selfish, he's all of these negative things that we really haven't gotten to see from him. He's usually pretty pragmatic, and he's usually pretty understated when it comes to his emotionality, but it's funny to see him act so selfishly. He's getting into a fight with Sonny because he wants to maintain his relationship with Sophia, and he's trying to implore Bowen to stay in the States because he wants him to stay for his own selfish reasons. The two most important events that happen in the chapter are happening because of the Sympathizer being selfish. I think it's funny because the last conversation we had, I was kind of singing the praises of the Sympathizer, talking about how he's generally good. But this chapter kind of makes me look a little bit silly. which is okay. I'm okay with admitting that maybe not I'm wrong, but it just shows that all great characters have flaws, and I think that this chapter really highlights the flaws that the Sympathizer is kind of working through right now at this stage of his life. Yeah, he's angry. He's angry with the world. He comes back home and he's expecting things to be a certain way, and they're just not that way. So this chapter is really him trying to reconcile the world that he thinks is going on around him with the world that actually is going on around him. He's been making a lot of progress over the last year, I want to say. He's kind of growing up a little bit during the 8 months of the filming, and really, since before he left, after the Major's death. I think that he's kind of growing up a little bit, but it's always interesting to see, someone kind of slide back into their normal routines, their actual nature. But yeah, like I said, I think that this one was pretty good, pretty short. I don't think I like this one quite as much as the previous one, which may be the first time that I'm saying that. I don't know. I usually say that the chapter was better than the last one, but I think this one, I'm not sure it was better than the last one. I will say, though, that we have, I believe, 10 chapters left. We have 14 through 23, so that's something to look forward to. That's an accomplishment. Thank you for sticking around and checking them out if you have. If not, go check the playlist out. Start over from scratch. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Kind of a quick one, kind of a quick chapter. Not really too much goes on, but a good one nonetheless. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about the chapter. If I missed anything, please give me a shout. I'd be happy to talk about it. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.